このワールドカップは次世代のラグビープレーヤーにこれからのラグビーの輝かしい未来を示し、そして希望を与えることを確信しております。ラグビーを応援してくださるファンや、この大会を機に新たにラグビーに触れられる方々にラグビーの素晴らしさを伝えていきたいと思います。日本ラグビーフットボール協会は日本、そして世界中の方々の心に残る大会にすることをお約束いたします。そして今後の日本のラグビーの発展につなげてまいります。簡単ですけれども挨拶とさせていただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。
Arigato, Mori-san. Before we open the floor for questions, I would just like to hand over to Brett Gosper, CEO of World Rugby, just to talk a little bit about World Rugby's aims and objectives for the tournament in 3 days' time. Thank you.
Konnichiwa and good afternoon. A year ago, we mapped out why we believed Rugby World Cup 2019 would be a very special event that would inspire a nation and actually provide a step change for development in Asia. And now on the eve of what we know will be an historic event for the reasons you've just heard, we're confident that all the ingredients are now in place for a very compelling and competitive tournament. A World Cup has never been so eagerly awaited for. It's just 10 years in the planning would testify to. And never has the competition appeared so open at this time, which is great for fans, obviously, and tournament interest. In the last month alone, 3 teams have occupied top spots in the rankings. And if you put that into context, prior to the tournament, only 3 teams had ever topped the rankings since they began in 2003. So there are lots of indicators there that this could be the most competitive World Cup we've seen. And beyond the battle for the Webb Ellis Cup, we're hopeful of a few rankings upsets, as we always are. May come from Fiji, may come from USA, and of course, we're seeing that the hosts are rising nicely and are in good form. Will we see another Brighton miracle? And actually, I'm not sure we should ever call a Japanese win again a miracle. It's far more expected. The emerging teams are telling us that they're the best prepared that they've ever been for a Rugby World Cup. And World Rugby has invested £60 million in qualified teams outside of the Six Nations and Sanzar. And this, combined with the most equitable match schedule we've had, will provide the best possible springboard. And now it's down to those teams on the day to perform. We've also made every effort to ensure that the players have the very best environment to perform in. This World Cup will feature the most comprehensive player welfare standards ever implemented for any rugby event anywhere, including independent concussion experts, matchday doctors, Hawkeye technology for concussion identification, robust mandatory requirements for team medics. Incredibly complete. And all of that is designed to support the welfare of the players. You only need to visit the host cities or turn on TV or your social media over the last few days to see that this tournament is going to be very, very big and hugely popular. We've seen how the teams have been greeted with a kind of rugby mania. The local cities and towns are embracing the teams with huge passion. And I think that's going to be one of the real differences, in a way, between this World Cup and other World Cups in terms of atmosphere. Japan are already proving to be spectacular hosts, and it's an eye-opener. In addition to exceptional ticket sales and superb host city engagement, this will be the most widely viewed and engaged consumed rugby event in history. Matches will be broadcast to 850 million homes in 217 territories, in line with our Asia growth strategy. We've also, due to that strategy, secured unprecedented broadcasting platforms in China and India, as well as USA. And indeed, coupled with our own offering, it's possible to access Rugby World Cup in every nation on the planet. This will also be the social Rugby World Cup, with a focus on innovation, engagement, and fun to attract those new audiences. And we really hope to break the 1 billion video views, which would be a milestone for any sport, actually.
but
It's not a picture on the street. It's not a picture on the street. It's a picture coming into the Mitchell Road. I'm sorry, I came. I really don't want to be angry at you. It's just
I'm sorry before you said anything. So let's.
I just want you to understand, because I know these laws very well.
Yeah.
Because of the work that I do with patients. You can't just use my picture just because I came to the voting. You can take pictures of the street there. Here, you identify exactly
that you came into the door. If you didn't want to go, you can come in from the other side also.
Where is the sign?
No, it doesn't have a sign. You come here, you're getting a photograph, you go there, you're getting a photograph. If you see a big crowd and you say, I don't want to get photographed.
I'm sorry, that's not how it works.
I don't know. I don't know.
It's his responsibility and his channel's responsibility to put a sign in here that they do. Because seeing it is not enough. Most people, how do I know that my I know this, by the way, because I work hard. So the same thing happened at the OG Center. The guy came in to take pictures. Sorry, you cannot take my picture while I'm in the shoe.
Right. But that's in a closed place. This is just the entrance.
This is the entrance below service.
I understand.
It's part of what I think will make your job more interesting, by the way.
Well, my job is
Forget it.
forget it. It's not recommended. It's not a recommended job.
I understand. My anger is not against you.
Yeah, I understand. But you're suggesting that I should.
Well, I can, as a citizen, and I'm inclined to do it, write to the area and tell them and complain that you were here.
Okay.
And they will come to you and say, you cannot do that. Because you have to have special permission from the people coming in here to photograph them. And if you don't put at least a sign, so if I see a sign that says you're going to photograph me, then you cannot
From this door.
on the street.
That's why I can't.
If you were here on the street, that would be a different story. Here is
Photograph into the room.
it's private land, it's private space. And privacy is very important. We don't want you to know we are really going to be.
Yeah. No, I was privacy. I was doing like general shot. I didn't know.
You can have your thing right there, and there's no problem. Here is private land, private property. How do I know that you are not following me all the way there with your camera and actually looking at what I'm looking at? I mean, it goes on and on and on, and I hate it. But on the other hand, if we don't watch out for our privacy, we're going to be in trouble.
I totally agree. So I'll go away in a second.
I know. I have to tell you honestly. So all I know, all about forgeries, I do that. Thank you. I'm not usually on the streets. I'm a forensics officer.
That's actually, thank you.
Have a great day.
that, so that we're not closed to that. Alan, you might want to add something for this particular tournament.
Yeah, we've looked at it. We continue to look at it. You know, every World Cup throws up some areas for discussion, and we'll review that very thoroughly with the teams, with the team doctors, and the research after the tournament, and move forward into the next cycle, planning with the right information. I think the way it's been raised very close to this tournament never gave us any opportunity to really look at change for Japan 2019, but we'll definitely review that.
So can I just clarify then, did none of the coaches of the top nations express any issues with that early enough for there to be any change?
No, I mean, the move to 31 players actually took place after Rugby World Cup 2011, and particularly in relation to front row cover, so having sufficiently qualified and appropriately able front row cover. Those 31 players were the squad for 2015, and at that stage, obviously, and again, we're talking about a tournament 10 years here in the making. So we've always been working with our colleagues here in Japan on that basis. But I think now, moving forward with what we know, we'll look at that again.
Next question, please. Yep, just in the middle here.
Hello, my name is Satoshi Takehana from Rugby Japan. So during the preparation of the tournament, lots of concerns were raised around the logistics side of the tournament, such as the transportation and accommodation around the venues, and also the shortage of the beer at the stadium. So how concerned were you during those preparations, and are you now satisfied?
Let me answer that. Look, great questions. We've talked a lot about beer, amongst other things, over recent years. I think you enter any planning phase for a tournament that's as complex and on the scale of a Rugby World Cup with challenges and to some extent concerns. And I'd like, again, as Bill and Brett have, to praise the work that we've done with all of the stakeholders here, the Japanese government. The host cities, as you've seen, have been and now really are being fantastic and shining, and the venue operators as part of that. I think for us it was about educating the venues and the cities here about what an international rugby event looks like, and we have an unbelievable, loyal, brilliant travelling audience, and they drink a lot of beer, and they make a lot of noise, and they're great for our sport, and it was just about getting that right. We have got that right. We're assured. The test events have proven that the plan's in place, not just for beer, but for the food and beverage offering, for the spectator experience, the journey that the fans will have from a transport perspective, the entertainment they'll receive before a match, in and around the match venue. That will all look very different to maybe what Japanese rugby fans have seen before. It will look fantastic for the international fans that are here, and yeah, we're really thrilled with the plans that are in place. I think you're going to be surprised.
And I'd also, I wouldn't underestimate rugby supporters. They normally find where they can get a beer, and they normally find where they can get something to eat and sleep as well. So they're a pretty resilient bunch.
Next question. We'll go Nick and then at the back. Thank you.
Hi, Brett. Nick Simon here from the Daily Mail in London. CVC have bought a share of the Six Nations, or there's at least reports that they have. Do you welcome the introduction of guys like that into rugby, and do you see it as something that is going to develop globally?
Was that falls off me? It's early to say. I'd say, as you are all well aware, we had another alternative on the table when we were looking at investment in the global game and how we could take the global game forward with a world league and so on. And we generated the possibility of high funding. The Six Nations have decided to take another route. I'd have to say we don't know enough about the ins and outs of that deal. It's been a bit shrouded, so we can't really comment at this stage whether it's going to be good or bad. Certainly someone as big an investor in the sport as a private equity firm like CVC will create influence, and that could be in some areas something that could concern us. And so it's important that we understand from CVC exactly what their medium to long-term plans are, and from that we can react. So it's a bit early to evaluate where that's all heading at this point in time.
Which areas could it concern you?
Well, when you have the areas that would concern you is that when you have a high funding commercial owner of the sport that isn't the governing body, then certain calls can be made in the interest of the commercialisation of that sport, which we may not think are in the interest of either the growth of it or the player welfare or other areas. So that we would want to make sure that for the right reasons our influence wasn't usurped. But, you know, many of our biggest members have welcomed this increased funding, and so we can only recognise it as a positive. We just have a couple of watch-outs and concerns, and I'm sure we'll have our opportunities to discuss those with CVC and the Six Nations who are directly involved in that relationship. So let's be optimistic about how these things will turn out, but we need to monitor that as we go forward.
And just a question for Bill or Brett. There's been a lot of comments recently from coaches about referees and consistency, and Eddie's talks and a lot of other guys. Are you happy that will not be an issue as the tournament goes on?
Well, we're confident that there'll be collaboration between players, referees, and coaches. I think that the situation regarding the high tackle, I think that has been well received by the rugby public. I think player safety is something that is obviously very much the top of our agenda. And I just thought it was quite interesting that this week that you saw that England, for instance, John Mitchell, he came out and he said, look, we might have to change the way in which we tackle slightly, but there was a meeting of the coaches this morning, and I think I'm led to believe that with Alan Roland as well, the referee, our referee manager, and that hopefully there's a fair bit of clarity around it.
Just to back up what Bill, there was a meeting this morning. All of the head coaches were there. All of the referees were in the room. There's good understanding. There's not always agreement with all of the decisions that are made, but there's good understanding behind those decisions. This is the fittest, best prepared group of match officials that we've ever had. They've never been supported by so much technology. There is Hawkeye, etc. There is also much greater alignment, I think, between citing, judicial. So everything is in place for as much consistency as possible. And of course, there'll be the odd hiccup. There always is. There's a human factor in refereeing, but we think that this group of match officials are the best prepared that we've had.
Yeah, and the referee indicated for high tackle that he obviously will consult with his two assistant referees on the sideline and also the TMO as well.
Thank you. I think one news at the back there.
Kia ora, Jenny May Clarkson from TVNZ in New Zealand. Just want to talk to the plight of the Pacific Island teams in terms of how do you stop pro clubs from holding back their players with inducements?
Well, this is something that obviously has occurred in the past, I understand, but every player who wants to be released to play international rugby has to be released by his club. So that if the player wants to play in a Rugby World Cup, he wants to play in an under-20s, wants to play in sevens, then he has to be released under our Regulation 9. So that is something that is sacrosanct, that is in tablets of stone that we have to protect our international brand. And that's where we are at the moment. That certainly, if players choose not to play international rugby, then that is their decision. We obviously want all the best players playing in a Rugby World Cup.
4 years on from the last Rugby World Cup, do you think those Pacific Island teams are in a better position?
Well, I think if you look back, Fiji 4 years ago were in a tough group, played extremely well. I think they look well prepared for this one. I think certainly watching Samoa play their game against Australia a couple of weeks ago, they certainly looked in good nick. And Tonga are always competitive. If you think back 8 years ago, they played in the opening game of the tournament in 2011, and they acquitted themselves really well. I think beat France in that tournament, the eventual finalist, and albeit they're in another tough group again. So I think certainly, ignore the Pacific Islands at your peril if I was a coach, because they are capable of playing outstanding rugby.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Rich Freeman.
Rich Freeman from Kyoto News. I've got a question for Mori-san regarding the legacy specifically in Japan. A lot has been said about converting and making more players out of children, about the elementary program, about tag rugby. But the fact is, and I know from personal experience with my children here under the current structure, a lot of children will find it very difficult to play rugby, given that many junior high schools and high schools don't have a rugby club, regarding the Bukatsu system, which means that kids feel obliged to stick with the sport that they're still playing now. And of course, there is no age grade rugby for anybody 15 years old and older. What are the JRFU going to do in the short term to make sure those children that have been watching the All Blacks and Wales and the Springboks can actually have an opportunity to play rugby?
それはちょっと難しい質問なんですけれども、小学校の今おっしゃった小学校のタグラグビーとか、それから中学校の部活動とかに、どうやったらラグビー競技が、できるかというようなことを発展的にやっていきたいと思っています。で、コピーで一生に一度っていうのがあるんですけれども、今ここに前に座ってる子どもたち、何歳 ?12 歳の子が、あと10年経ってあと20年経った時にまたラグビーのワールドカップが日本であるというような目標が持てるようなラグビーのワールドカップにしてみたいなというふうに思ってます。で、これから小さい子どもたちへの育成っていうのはこれからちょっと時間をかけて考えていきたいと思ってます。
Mick Cleary here, and then we'll go to the back.
Hi, Mick Cleary, the Daily Telegraph. Question for Brett. Brett, are you confident that all your drug testing procedures are adequate in the modern age? And more importantly, are you confident and you still believe that rugby is a game for all shapes and sizes and is not going to become more and more of a power game, as we saw from pictures of the Springboks in their dressing room? It's very much a game for well-defined and well-muscled people, and those concerns in South Africa, particularly about the drug issues detected at Craven Week.
Yeah, look, I'd say first of all, we invest vast sums of money and have a very meticulous drug testing program, intelligence testing, biopassports. We've been testing the players at this World Cup over the last 4 years. It hasn't stopped. Obviously, mainly out of competition where you're more likely to catch offenders. Our belief is we do not have a systematic or institutional doping problem at the elite level of rugby. We've seen some evidence in the community as reflecting community desires to... Sorry, I'm hearing myself on my earphone here. So we see some of it at the lower levels that reflects the community desire to be looking good and fit and all the rest of it, not necessarily a rugby thing. But at the elite level, we're not seeing that issue. And yes, we believe rugby still is a sport for all shapes and sizes, be they more fit, all shapes and sizes than they were back in the day. We have also, as you know, run some pretty innovative or generated some pretty innovative law changes around player welfare, designed to open the space up in the game, trying to take some of the brute strength elements out of it to try and progress in those areas. And we'll see what those trials throw up, but you don't really know what happens until you actually put that into the context of real games in real competitions. So short answer, in the elite game, exceptional findings occasionally but no systemic problem in terms of, and very confident of our drug testing program.
So just to the back.
Nigel Yolen, Radio Sport from New Zealand. Question with Mr. Gosper, please. All the changes with regards to player welfare, how much of those are also driven by World Rugby wanting to protect themselves from future litigation similar to what we saw happen to the NFL?
Yeah, I don't think we come at it from a legal perspective, but I'm sure going out of your way to communicate and find the best for your players in player welfare, it probably has the knock-on effect of increasing any issues that there might be legally in the future and so on. But genuinely, we go after better levels of player welfare to reduce injury rates for the good of the players, to attract more people into the sport, and to be able to say that this sport is getting safer, not more dangerous. So we are driven by the player welfare, and if that also puts us in a stronger, firmer, robust legal position, we're happy with that too.
If you didn't make those changes, Brett, would there be a genuine concern about the physical sustainability of the sport, given how athletes are getting bigger, faster, stronger?
Sorry, I don't say that the question again. I'm sorry.
I was saying, given the fact that athletes are getting bigger, faster, stronger, there's always new technology making these athletes better than what they are. If those changes were not to be made, would there be a real concern about the physical sustainability of the sport?
Yeah, look, I think again, as I mentioned before, we're conscious to not just change the laws of the game and hope that they're good for player welfare. We've actually made quite a change with the Marcoussis in France seminar, which actually set out to find laws of the game that would drive down injury rates and then see what effect that might have on the game and so on. So I do think we're very conscious of ensuring that although we've not seen any marked increase in the elite game in injury rates since 2003, we've obviously seen increase in concussion as the awareness factor has kicked in and so on. In fact, in the recent annual reports, concussion has dropped 15% in those same annual competitions, because we've gone past the saturation of awareness point. It's now about managing and preventing those injuries. So I think we're working very hard to ensure that the game is safe and shaped in a way that it's not just for brute force.
We'll go Owen, then Steve, and then come to the front here. Just here.
Hi, Owen Slott from The Times. Question for Brett and Bill. Just to follow up on the earlier CVC question, can I ask, have you met with CVC, or have you tried to arrange meetings with them? And can you see a future where you would be interested in working together to achieve the similar ends?
I personally haven't met with CVC Owen at all, but I think colleagues have spoken to them as a matter of good practice in a way, just to see what's happening. I do. Obviously, there's great interest within CVC when you look at the properties that they've picked up in the last 12 months in rugby. But Brett would deal with them more than I would.
So yes, we have met with CVC in the conversations that we're having around the World League and so on. We were considering many different types of investors in the sport, of which CVC was one contender. Of course, as Bill says, with CVC's recent positions taken in the game, it would be madness for us to not be in some form of communication with them to better understand how that might play out. In the interests of the game, it's quite right that we would have discussions with them, either via their shareholders, which are our members, or if needed, directly as well. So I think that's something that can be envisaged. I think there are lots of areas of commonality, even if there are potential divergences in some areas. I think we all want a healthy, growing sport. We probably come at it from a slightly different angle, but it's good that we get together and ensure that that what we're all doing is for the good of the growth of the sport.
Thank you. Steve Jones. And then we'll do two final ones after.
Thanks. Stephen Jones from Sunday Times. Brett or Bill, in the meeting this morning between players, officials and the coaches, were they told, or in fact were they warned, that there'll be a big crackdown on screaming, shouting, barking at the referee, and also centres or people completely disengaged from the action appealing to the referee for decisions? Because I know it used to come under the heading of preventative refereeing, etc., but it's now gone completely bonkers. Will there be a cut? Will that be cut down?
I personally wasn't at the meeting, but I would I concur with your comments.
Brett, is there something
Yes, look, I was at the meeting and I have to confess that was not discussed at the meeting or raised, but the referees and match officials are very aware that we're very strict on this area, and I would also concur that it's not something that we like to see on the field, and we can remind and have reminded management in emails that have gone out prior to say that this is not something that we would like to see. So we'd be supporting the referees in any action that they took to prevent that from happening on the field. We'd be backing them up 100%.
I think just to add,
and that they know.
Just to add to that, Alain Roland in his meetings with coaches in the build-up to the tournament has had those conversations.
Sure, it was just not today.
Just here at the front.
Hi there, Zain Nabi, CNN International. My question's for Bill Beaumont. Bill, we've heard Brett reference the fact that 60 million's been invested in teams. You spoke about riding off the Pacific Islands at your peril. And of course, Japan are hosting this tournament. When you look at the Tier 2 nations, which do you expect to make the biggest impact, and which nation do you think could make the knockout rounds?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. I hope they all do. I think what if you look at the impact that teams have made, certainly in World Cup previously, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do again. Georgia will be one team that would certainly have been competitive. I think Samoa look as though that they look as though they're going to be pretty good. Fiji, USA, great improvement in 15s, also sevens where they've been successful. So those are the sort of countries that I can see maybe have one or two upsets. But that's why we play the game, isn't it? You always want to go to a game of rugby not knowing who's going to win.
Thank you, Bill. Final question at the back there. Thanks.
This is a question for Mr. Shibasu-san. Last year, the Rugby World Cup advised players around the wearing of tattoos and covering them up so to not cause offence to the host here. Today we saw some All Blacks, they had covered their tattoos up at training. Is that still your official stance? And also, what is your stance on players covering up tattoos, not only in public areas, but also maybe even on the playing field? Thank you.
質問ありがとうございます。タトゥーの問題については、チームと我々との間でも議論をしております。そして、各キャンプ地とあるいはスタジアムとの間でもいろいろな議論をしておりますが、やはりタトゥーは一つの文化の問題だというふうに私どもも受け止めておりまして、その文化の問題に対してはお互いの立場を考えて、ダイバーシティという側面も含めてお互いの立場を理解し合うというやり取りが必要だと思っておりまして、そういう話し合いがいろいろな場所で進みつつあります。したがいまして私は実際に今回の大会においてそういう面でのタトゥーに関連するトラブルみたいなものはあまり起こらないというふうに思っております。
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that from a Rugby World Cup perspective, and we've talked about this issue a lot over the last few years. It's not an issue. I think, as Shimazu-san quite rightly said, it's about educating people from different parts of the world. Where here in Japan, the culture around tattoos is different to many of the countries where the teams are from. We've spent a lot of time talking to the teams about that. We are blessed with players in our sport, in a values-based sport, that understand the need to respect other cultures. There's never been any issue with that from the teams and the players. And similarly, we've worked hard through Shimazu-san and the organising committee to make sure that the host cities, and particularly those around team camps, understand that the players have tattoos from their own countries and cultures. So we don't see it as an issue. We're delighted that the teams that are here are respectful and embracing those cultural differences. We're equally as delighted that that the host cities and their hosts understand the position of the players. The reality is, as we move into the tournament, most of the facilities outside of the match venues that the teams are using, they're now using on an exclusive basis for training. If they're in a pool, if they're in a gymnasium, if they're at a training venue, there aren't any issues from a cultural perspective. So we don't see it as an issue going forward.
Thank you very much. That brings to an end the Q&A session. Thank you very much to our top table. Thank you, everybody. Just in terms of the logistics now, we'll do pods of TV outside for those who are interested. So we'll do one for international and one for Japanese. The Japanese will be in the orange room just across the corridor. But before we do that, there'll be a formal photo opportunity with the top table. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You spot the cameras, not who's behind me.
I